Hello there. Do you believe in miracles? The Catholic Church has two saints who were recently added to the list of saints, or the roll of saints, I guess you would call it. There is now Pope St. John the 23rd and Pope St. John Paul II. And what a lot of people don't realize about the process of canonization, and I'm not Catholic specifically, by the way, I have a certain healthy respect for that tradition, and as I think people should, but I'm not specifically Catholic. But what a lot of people don't realize about this process of canonization is that in order to be classified a saint by the highest authority of the Catholic Church, the current Pope, miracles must be attributed to the person who is being considered for canonization. I believe it's actually two miracles in most cases, but certainly one miracle is supposed to be attributed to a person who is up for canonization as a saint. And the church goes through a very extensive, exhaustive process to determine whether the person under consideration actually did perform a miracle. It's a very long process. It usually takes years for a person to rise to the level of canonization. But these miracles are thoroughly investigated. They are thoroughly documented, and it takes a long time for the church to say that a person was responsible for a miracle. They are thoroughly investigated. What about you? Do you believe in miracles? Well, I've had certain experiences in my life that, well, because of those experiences, I do believe in miracles for the most part. And I want to share just a few of those with you. Many years ago, I was sitting in my car looking at a newspaper in the front yard for some reason, hadn't gone in the house for some reason, was still sitting out in the car looking at this newspaper, and a tree fell on my car, missed me by inches. I could have gotten killed instantly, but it missed me by inches. And there was no reason to think this particular tree was going to crash that day. It had been there for many, many years, and it just happened to fall over one day, not impale, but crush the top of my car, and it missed me by inches. And a lot of people said, well, that was a miraculous occurrence. Well, you could say that it was just a happy coincidence or a happy turn of chance, but that wasn't the only time. I've experienced other things that could be considered miraculous as well. Some years later, I was driving home from work on a country road, and I would drive typically about 50 miles each day between work and home because, there was no work there in the area that paid anything. And so the sort of last leg of the journey was on a twisting country road in sort of a forested area. And I was driving a big black Chevrolet Caprice, and that big car may have protected me to a certain extent, but I was extremely tired, extremely exhausted that day. And on a particularly sharp curve, and it happened close to a church, by the way, as a matter of fact, right across the road from the church is where this impact happened, I lost control of my car and went careening off the road. It was one of the scariest sights I ever saw in my life when I knew I was going to crash because the road was doing this. Just curving all over the place, and I'm thinking, oh no, this is it. I'm dead. I'm about to die here. And so I ran off the road and crashed into a tree. Direct impact, head-on collision with a tree. I got out of that car and walked away uninjured. I was mad because my car was a total loss. I was in the kind of accident that people die in, and yet I was mad about the loss of the car. And a lot of people say that miraculous. It certainly seemed to be because I was almost expecting to die as I was watching this curvy road zoom back and forth, and I was trying to get control of that car, and I couldn't get control of it. And head-on crash with a tree, walked away without a scratch. Then a few years later, I was also driving home from work on the interstate, and once again I was driving considerable distance, and I was in a hurry to get home because it was like a 1-hour drive every day to get home from work, and I was on this interstate, and it was raining that day, and it was raining a lot. And traffic jams are bad in this particular area. I mean, somebody changes a tire on the side of a road, you've got a massive backup, people slowing down to see what happens. That's how bad traffic can be. But it was particularly bad on this day because it had been raining a lot. And before this day of rain, it hadn't rained very much, so the road was extremely slick. Well, moving along, cars kind of move along in masses on those kind of days. You have a bunch of them sort of moving together. Everybody's in a hurry to get where they're going, and they're bunched up way too close a lot of times, and it's kind of hard to avoid that, just considering the behavior of the motorists. Everybody's wanting to get home. Everybody's wanting to get home really fast. But it was raining, and we were moving along probably about 50 miles an hour, something like that. And cars were bunched up really close together, and all of a sudden, ahead of me, I see brake lights everywhere. And I literally had nowhere to go. There was just no way that I was going to keep from crashing right into another car. The cars were too close. And some strange kind of way, the car comes to a stop, and I didn't hit anybody. To this day, I'm at a loss to explain how that happened, because I should have crashed into another car. The cars were way too close together, and it was almost inexplicable. And I didn't have time to hang around and figure out what was going on or what had happened, because, you know, the traffic did start to move again, and there was really no time to get out and look around or anything like that. But I should have crashed into another car and possibly done some serious damage and possibly hurt some other people and myself. But that didn't happen. There was another occasion. I was driving a delivery truck along Interstate 20 between Anniston, Alabama and Birmingham, Alabama, and this was many years ago. And there was a situation where my truck was broken down on the side of the road, and there was a guardrail ahead, and there was this truck coming at me at a high rate of speed in my lane. And the short answer is that truck should have, you know, crashed into the vehicle and possibly destroyed my vehicle and killed me, but somehow or another it didn't happen. Now, it's easy to write these things off as coincidences, but when a whole bunch of them happen, that's a different situation. And here's another thing that a lot of people consider miraculous, and I guess that it was. You note there is a little bit of a tone of uncertainty, but in December 2002, just not too long before Christmas, I came down with bacterial meningitis, which is a deadly disease. It's an infectious disease, and it can come on you very quick, and it can kill a person within hours, literally. And I don't know how it happened, but I contracted bacterial meningitis. And I was living alone in an apartment in Bessemer, Alabama at that time. And at the time this happened, I wasn't working because I'd been laid off from my telecommunications job with General Dynamics Network Systems. And so I was out of work and living alone, and got up one morning with a terrible headache. It was like the worst headache I'd ever experienced in my entire life. It's something, this headache, not only this headache that I had, but the experience that I had afterward, those are things that I would not wish on my worst enemy. I have been through some things that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I can't imagine wishing certain things on another human being. I just can't do it, because some things are just too terrible. But I had this whole headache, and it wasn't going away, and there was nothing that I could do about it. Aspirin wasn't helping, bed rest wasn't helping, nothing was helping. And my best friend, William, happened to give me a call, and I told him what was going on, told him I was hurting really, really bad and didn't know what to do. And he was going to call and check again in about 30 minutes, and he called back and said, you know, this is really, really bad. He said, well, do you want me to come down and take you to the hospital? And so I said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I was reluctant to go to the hospital because I didn't have insurance at that time, having recently been laid off. And so he makes the 30-mile drive, comes down, comes to the apartment, and by this time I'm getting in really bad shape. And fortunately, the hospital, UAB Medical West, wasn't that far away. Drove me into the hospital, and the last thing I remember for quite a while was telling somebody, I need some help. And that's the last clear memory for a while. The next memories are extremely hazy. I remember being in a hospital room all by myself in a hospital bed with a tube down my throat, and that's a horrible situation to be in. This wanting to swallow, needing to swallow, and you can't do it because there's this tube on down your throat, and there's these hazy, ridiculous, disorganized memories for quite a while. And then my first clear memory was the day before Christmas, that there were people in the room and I was actually talking to them, and we were talking about what had happened. And apparently what had happened, I have no memory of it, was that I actually suffered a seizure in the emergency room, because bacterial meningitis is a disease that affects your brain. It causes swelling around your brain, and it increases pressure dramatically on your brain. So I've never had seizure disorder or anything of that kind, but because what was happening to my brain, I did in fact suffer a major seizure in the emergency room, and apparently had to be strapped down, rushed in for a CAT scan and sedated, and the CAT scan was bad. And it just so happened, strangely enough, that my personal physician, the one I'd used when I'd had insurance, was an infectious disease specialist who had all kinds of specialized training in tropical diseases and things of that nature, and he had an office right across the street from the hospital. So they called him in, and he was able to get there fairly quickly, and it's just a weird confluence of events that this highly trained, specialized doctor happened to be mine, and he happened to be across the street, and he happened to be available, and he came in really quick. And I was in a medically induced coma for a while, which is what is necessary to protect the brain sometimes. So when you hear that, it really is an effort to protect a person's brain. That's what it actually is, a medically induced coma, because if they don't do it, there's going to be a lot of brain activity and the brain could possibly be damaged. So medically induced comas are a good thing. They are actually intended to help a person and prevent damage. And that sounds horrible to people, that there's medically induced comas, but it actually is an effort to help the person, to protect the person. That's what a medically induced coma is when you hear that. But still, I can tell you, if you ever get in a situation where you've got a tube down your throat, that is a bad situation. You are in serious condition. And I learned later that during the course of this very critical near-death illness, that a lot of people did come to the hospital, and it was a nice feeling to know that there were that many people who did care that much, and some of them actually traveled for a while. My friend William didn't have a lot of money at the time. From what I understand, he was actually spending some nights in his car in the hospital parking lot. And some relatives of mine came in and they hooked up with William. They were able to get him some meals and get him some help and things like that. He stayed with me for a while. And from what I was told, I was being treated with 3 different powerful antibiotics at one time. And from what I was told, it looked to everybody like I was going to die. I wasn't going to make it. And then overnight, there was a dramatic turnaround. As the attending physician at the time, Dr. Wiley Livingston, told me, he said, one day you were dying. Next day you were well. He said, you've been given a second chance. Go do something with your life. Because all the indications were that I possibly wasn't going to live, that I was going to die. And then overnight it just changed. And yes, I was being treated with 3 antibiotics, but the last bacterial meningitis patient they had in that hospital was dead within 12 hours. And I came very near death, but not only was the turnaround dramatic, but the prognosis was for no ill effects, for a complete recovery. And as far as I know, my recovery from that disease was complete. It got to the point that I was very near death. But there was a very dramatic turnaround, and then I did recover completely. And the medical staff called this miraculous. Even though I was being treated with everything in their arsenal, the turnaround was just so dramatic and the recovery was just so complete that even the medical staff considered this to be a miraculous event. And there are some hazy memories of some rather mysterious visitors, and I won't go into all that because, as I said, that is really hazy, and I was in a bad situation there. But I did recover completely. And these are just a series of events that have occurred with me over the years that there seem to be just too many of them to be coincidence. I've escaped really bad situations by the skin of my teeth over and over and over again, and a lot of times it doesn't appear to be anything that I've done. It just appears to be a lightning bolt out of the sky. And I regard these occurrences as miraculous. If you haven't been in a situation like this, you may not see something like that as miraculous. It may just be a bunch of happy turns of chance. It may just all be coincidence. But when you add all this up, to my mind, I can't see it as coincidence. I see these things as miracles. As I said, the Catholic Church goes to a lot of trouble to document miracles before they canonize somebody. And I'm not Catholic. I lean more Episcopalian. That may come as a surprise to some people. Oh, you mean you're not some weird evangelical? No. No, I used to be, but now I lean more Episcopalian, even though I haven't been confirmed in the Episcopal Church. So based on experiences I've had, a number of them over the years, I do believe in miracles. So what can I tell you about miracles? What I can tell you about miracles from my experience is they are mysterious and often inexplicable. There are all kinds of people running around telling you to expect a miracle, tell you can just ask God for a miracle, and if you got the faith, you can get it. And there are all kinds of people on television who tell you this. But my experiences with miracles, they are mysterious and inexplicable. They just come out of nowhere like lightning bolts out of the clear blue sky. There is no particular formula that you can use to get a miracle. Sorry, prosperity preachers. Sorry, believe and receive, name and claim it folks. But there are no specific formulas available to everybody that you can use to get a miracle. You can ask for a miracle, specific miracle all day long, and you may not get it. Miracles tend to be mysterious and inexplicable. And somebody who's telling you that you can have a miracle that you just happen to want, they either don't know what they're talking about, most likely, or they're lying to you. And we could discuss that if you want to. If anybody wants to discuss this thing with me, the email address is presented at the beginning of this video. I'm not coming at this from any kind of a selfish motivation. I just want you to open your mind and realize that there are possibilities, that things can happen. But I'm not promoting any kind of formula to get a miracle, because I don't believe there is a specific formula. Now, are there people with unique gifts and possibly unique powers in the world? I think there might be. But here's what you can count on about that. People who really do have special gifts that could possibly involve healing and other things, you're probably not going to find them calling a lot of attention to themselves. Those gifts will be limited in scope, more than likely. The people will not be approaching it from a haughty, vain, look at me, look how powerful I am, look how connected I am to God. Those are not going to be the kind of people who possess legitimate gifts. You can be pretty sure of that. And I might come on here and talk a little bit more about that. But I believe in miracles. Do you? Believing in miracles doesn't suggest anything about how you get a miracle, because, as I said, they are inexplicable. They are mysterious. They come out of the blue when you just happen to need them. Now, a lot of times you're going to think you need a miracle and you won't get it. So there's a lot that we don't understand, or that I don't understand about miracles. But I do know this. They can happen, and they do happen. And I hope that if you're ever in one of those situations where you're desperately in need of a miracle, that you'll get one. Is there a guarantee that you'll get one? No, I don't think there is. But you might. It is possible. And so I hope that what I've said will cause you to think about it a little bit and just sort of open your mind to possibilities. And that's really the only motivation with sharing this with you today. Thank you, and have a good day.